hello, dear YouTube viewers, I hope you're doing well. Okays, let's start our video. The story begins in a small coastal town wrapped in the quiet rhythm of autumn. The sea hums beyond the cliffs, gulls circle lazily overhead, and the mornings carry a comforting chill. Inside a modest seaside house, Ellie, heart moves softly through her kitchen, preparing coffee while her husband, David, sits at the table reading the news on his tablet. The morning feels ordinary, safe, familiar, the kind of normal that couples build after years together. They exchange light jokes about David's bad coffee-making skills and the smell of paint that always lingers on Ellie's hands. He teases her about how she always forgets to eat when she's working on a new canvas. She rolls her eyes but smiles. To anyone watching, they seem perfectly content, a stable marriage, a peaceful home, an easy silence. Yet, beneath this quiet, something fragile flickers. David notices Ellie staring out the kitchen window for too long. Her eyes linger on the line of trees beyond their backyard, the woods that stretch all the way to the cliffs. He asks if something's wrong, but she only shakes her head and says she didn't sleep well. "The sea was loud last night," she murmurs. He nods, not wanting to press her. She's been distant lately, absent-minded, lost in her thoughts, painting less and walking more. He assumes it's just creative fatigue, the kind all artists face. That afternoon, the wind picks up, carrying the scent of salt and damp leaves. Ellie grabs her bag and keys. She tells David she's running to town to get more paint supplies. "I'll be back before dinner," she says with a quick smile. He waves from the porch as she drives off down the narrow coastal road, sunlight glinting off her windshield. Hours pass. The sun dips. The dinner grows cold. Her phone goes unanswered. David tells himself not to worry, that maybe she met June for coffee or got caught up watching the waves again. But when darkness settles and there's still no sign of her car, a pulse of panic begins to rise in his chest. By 10, he's driving the same roads himself, the art store, the coffee shop, the docks. Nothing. When midnight hits, he finally calls the police. The dispatcher's voice is calm, rehearsed, promising to send someone. By morning, their quiet town is filled with flashing lights, volunteers, search dogs, and the low murmur of neighbors whispering theories. Flyers with her photo, Ellie smiling beneath a wide-brimmed hat, flap against lampposts in the cold wind. Some people say maybe she ran away. Others say maybe she needed space. The darker voices ask if something worse happened. David answers questions he can't process. He replays every conversation they've ever had, trying to spot the crack he missed. He remembers her last look at him before driving away, a small, almost hesitant smile. Was it a goodbye? By nightfall, Detective Rowan meets him outside the house. If she's not found within 24 hours, the detective says gently, "We'll widen the search." David nods, numb, staring out toward the restless sea. The next morning, as the town begins to stir again, David sits alone on the couch, the untouched coffee beside him. The front door creaks open. He looks up, heart pounding. Ellie stands there, barefoot, calm, her hair tangled by wind, her clothes the same as when she left. There's no sign of struggle, no bruises, no exhaustion. Just an eerie stillness about her, as if something within her has gone quiet. David rushes to her, voice breaking as he grabs her hands. She looks at him, her face unreadable, and says in a voice too calm, "I told you I'd be back." And for the first time since she left, he feels no relief, only confusion and a faint, unexplainable fear. When Ellie returned, David tried to believe it was simple shock, some temporary trauma that would fade with time. He approached her gently, careful not to push too hard. Over dinner, his voice trembled as he asked, "Where were you? Did someone take you? Are you hurt?" She looked at him blankly, as if translating the words from another language. "I don't remember much," she said softly. "I walked. Then I came home." Her tone was unnervingly calm, too calm. It wasn't confusion, it was detachment, as if she were repeating lines she had memorized. Doctors ran their tests. No head injury, no sedatives, no signs of harm. They called it temporary dissociative amnesia, a side effect of stress, but David wasn't convinced. The woman in front of him looked like his wife, sounded almost like her, but there was a subtle wrongness he couldn't explain. Her rhythm of speech had changed. Her gestures were different, slower, more deliberate. She now hummed quietly when she worked or cooked, a tune neither of them recognized. When he asked what song it was, she said she didn't know. He brushed it off at first, trying to rationalize it as a coping mechanism. But something deep in him refused to relax. That night, he found her standing in front of the bathroom mirror, motionless. Steam from the shower curled around her, blurring her reflection. He stood in the doorway, uncertain, watching her fingers trace the glass. "Ellie," he asked quietly. She didn't turn. After a long pause, she said, "Does my face look the same to you?" Her reflection caught his eye. The fog cleared just enough for him to see her smile faintly, though her lips hadn't moved. He blinked, startled, and the moment was gone. She turned to him, eyes wide and searching, and he forced a shaky laugh. "You're just tired," he said, though his voice betrayed him. She nodded, but when she looked back into the mirror, her smile didn't return. In the days that followed, the unease only grew. Ellie began to change in small but distinct ways. Her once soft, hesitant tone was now sharp, confident, almost cold. Her paintings, once filled with the soft glow of sunsets and sea foam, grew darker, abstract, and distorted. David noticed strange new forms appearing in them, unfamiliar landscapes, twisted figures, faces half hidden in the brushwork. When he asked about them, she said she didn't remember painting them at all. Her memory slipped in strange directions. She forgot their anniversary date, the name of his favorite coffee, the street where they first met. But then she mentioned things that had never happened: a trip to Italy, a house with blue shutters, a friend named Marianne. David corrected her gently, but she only frowned, insisting she remembered clearly. He laughed uneasily, pretending not to care, but inside, fear settled like ice in his stomach. Trauma couldn't explain this. It felt like he was living with someone who knew how to imitate his wife, but not be her. He began keeping notes, a private list of differences. Her handwriting had changed. Her laughter didn't sound the same. She no longer liked the scent of jasmine candles she used to love. She now used phrases she'd never used before, old-fashioned, almost foreign. On her latest paintings, she began signing her maiden nickname, Lena, a name she had once told him she despised. Then one evening, he found something strange. The soles of her shoes were caked with thick, dark mud, the kind found only in the northern woods, miles beyond the area she ever visited. He cleaned them quietly, saying nothing, though his hands trembled the whole time. A few nights later, he woke up to the sound of the back door creaking. Ellie was standing on the porch in her nightgown, eyes open but unfocused, staring out toward the distant forest. Her lips moved slowly, and when he came closer, he heard her whisper, "It's still calling me." His voice broke as he asked, "Who's calling you?" She turned to him, her face half lit by moonlight. Her eyes shimmered strangely, as if they belonged to someone else. Then she smiled, a soft, knowing smile, and said nothing at all. David couldn't let go of the unease growing inside him. Every smile from Ellie felt slightly wrong, every word rehearsed. The more he tried to rationalize her behavior, the deeper his doubt grew. One gray morning, when she left to buy groceries, he drove to the edge of town, toward the forest where she'd supposedly been found. The road narrowed into dirt, and soon the trees surrounded him, thick and ancient, the air heavy with damp moss and silence. He parked near the trail and followed it deeper in, guided only by instinct. After a mile, the ground beneath his boots changed, darker, softer, faintly scorched. Then he saw it, a clearing ringed by trees that looked almost singed. In the center lay a circle of blackened earth, cracked as if something had burned there long ago. Scattered among the ashes were strange fragments, bits of melted glass, a piece of scorched fabric, and half buried in the dirt, a silver pendant. He brushed the soil away and froze when he saw the engraving, YLH, her maiden initials, from before she met him. He stared at it for a long time, the metal cool against his palm, before slipping it into his pocket. He said nothing when he returned home, only placed it quietly on the kitchen counter, planning to ask later. But when Ellie came in that evening, her expression changed instantly. The color drained from her face. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice sharp, not frightened, but furious. "I found it in the woods," he said carefully. "Near where they said you." Before he could finish, she snatched the pendant from the counter, clutching it tightly. "It doesn't belong here," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were cold. Without another word, she left the room. That night, David heard her pacing upstairs, muttering to herself. When he checked later, the pendant was gone. The next day, June stopped by. She was carrying a pie and forced a smile, but her eyes flicked uneasily toward Ellie, who was painting in silence. When Ellie went upstairs, June leaned closer to David and whispered, "She's not the same, is she? You can feel it." David wanted to deny it, to protect Ellie from judgment, but no words came. June continued, "A week before she disappeared, I saw her near the woods. She was talking to someone or something. There was no one else there, but she was speaking, like she was listening to answers." Her voice dropped lower. Whatever happened out there, she didn't come back alone. That night, David couldn't sleep. Something inside him demanded truth, and so he went into Ellie's studio, the one room she had asked him never to enter. The faint smell of turpentine and wet paint filled the air. Sketches covered the walls, hundreds of them. Faces. All of them Ellie's, yet none quite right. Some older, some younger, some smiling in ways she never did. In one, her eyes were pitch black. In another, she had a faint scar that his Ellie never had. One drawing stood out. Across the bottom, in neat handwriting, she had titled it, "The One Who Stayed." David turned it over, his throat tightening as he read the words scrawled on the back. "I came home. She didn't." He stared at the paper until his hands began to shake. The woman sleeping in his bed was Ellie, and yet not. The thought sank deep into him, cold and paralyzing. The next day, Detective Rowan appeared unannounced. His eyes were tired, his tone measured. "We've been reviewing the area where she was found," he said quietly. "There were 2 sets of footprints near that clearing. One matches your wife's. The other smaller, lighter, maybe a woman's, but different size." David frowned, confused. "Someone was with her?" Rowan hesitated, then nodded. "We think so. And there's more." He lowered his voice. Another missing person report came in from a nearby village. Same night Ellie disappeared. Same build, same hair color. That woman was never found. The detective's gaze held David's. "If your wife remembers anything, you need to tell me immediately." David nodded, but he knew there was nothing normal left to remember. Upstairs, he could hear Ellie humming again, that same haunting tune she'd started after she returned, and for the first time, he wondered if the woman he'd brought home from the forest was a stranger wearing his wife's face. David could no longer live with the unanswered questions that hung between them. Every moment with Ellie felt borrowed, like being with a shadow that wore her smile, but not her soul. So one gray afternoon, under the pretense of getting closure, he convinced her to drive with him to the woods. She resisted at first, her expression unreadable, fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "Why?" she asked quietly. "There's nothing there." "Maybe not," he replied, "but we'll never know unless we see." The drive was quiet, filled only with the hum of the tires and the faint rhythm of her breathing. The closer they got, the heavier the air seemed to grow. The forest loomed ahead, tall, ancient, watching. When they reached the clearing, Ellie stepped out first, her breath quick and uneven. The world felt muted there, as if sound itself hesitated. Even the wind refused to move. She looked around slowly, her eyes glinting with something between fear and familiarity. Then, almost unconsciously, she began to hum that same tune, low, haunting, and eerily melodic. David's heart pounded. "Ellie," he said softly, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" She froze. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned toward him, tears welling up as she gave a small, trembling smile. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," she whispered. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, washing the ash-colored ground. Ellie knelt in the center of the burned circle, her fingers tracing the blackened earth. "Something found me here," she murmured. "It offered me peace, a way to forget everything. The pain, the noise in my head, the loneliness. But it needed a place to stay." David's breath caught. "What do you mean?" She looked up at him, her tears mixing with rain. "I thought it would take my sadness," she said, voice shaking. "Instead, it took me." From her pocket, she pulled out the pendant, the same one she had taken from the counter days before. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. She placed it gently on the wet soil. "Maybe I can still choose," she whispered. A tremor ran through the air. The trees swayed though the wind had stopped. David heard her voice echo, soft, distant, calling his name from every direction at once. Then silence. He fell to his knees beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Ellie, please," he begged. "Come back to me. Don't leave again." For a moment, her eyes flickered, the warmth of the old Ellie breaking through. Her lips parted in a trembling smile. "If you love me," she said faintly, "let me go." The wind surged violently, lifting leaves and dirt around them. The pendant turned to ash, vanishing in a faint shimmer of light. Ellie gasped, then collapsed into his arms. When she woke hours later, her eyes were clear again. She didn't remember the drive, the forest, or the storm. She just looked at David, confused but calm, and whispered, "What happened?" He brushed her hair back and smiled weakly. The coldness in her voice was gone, replaced by the quiet warmth he thought he'd lost forever. But as he helped her stand, he couldn't shake the haunting echo that still lingered through the trees, her voice, faint and distant, saying goodbye. Weeks passed quietly, as if the storm that tore through their lives has finally drifted away. The town moves on, and so do they, or at least they pretend to. Ellie fills her days with painting again. The darkness in her art fades, replaced by bursts of color, golds, soft blues, pale pinks, tones of renewal. Her laughter slowly returns, though it carries a fragile echo, like something rebuilt from broken glass. David watches her with silent relief. Every morning feels almost normal again, breakfast together, a walk by the sea, her gentle hum while she paints. Yet, beneath his calm smile, unease coils deep inside him. He tells himself not to dwell on the missing day, on what she said in the forest, on the thing that looked through her eyes and spoke with her voice. When Detective Rowan visits one last time, he closes the file and says it's over. Temporary amnesia, stress, nothing more. David nods, but doesn't believe it. Late at night, when the house grows still, he hears that same low humming again, drifting from her studio. He steps inside, finds her painting a forest clearing bathed in silver light. And in the far corner of the canvas, almost hidden in shadow, rests a tiny pendant half buried in the dirt, glowing faintly as if remembering something she cannot. Ending line. "She vanished for just one day, but when she came back, I realized some distances can't be crossed, even when you're standing right beside the person you love." Weeks passed softly, the house breathing again in fragile peace. The morning smell of coffee and salt air, the windows open to the sea breeze. Ellie paints every day now, the colors brighter, the strokes lighter, as if she's painting her way out of the shadows. She laughs more, hums to herself, and sometimes even sings, small signs of life returning. She doesn't remember what happened. When she asks about those missing hours, David only smiles and says, "It doesn't matter anymore." But it does. Deep down, he knows something in her changed forever, something she left behind in those woods, or something that followed her back. Detective Rowan closes the case, calling it temporary amnesia. The town forgets soon enough. But David can't. Every night, when the house falls silent, he hears her humming that same eerie tune, faint, like an echo through time. One evening, he finds her painting again, a forest clearing under a silver sky. Hidden in the corner of the canvas lies a small pendant, half buried in dark earth, catching the light. And as he stares at it, he finally understands. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe our channel. Awesome visual story.